It's been a little while since I've done one of these, so today I am doing another trash to treasure video. Hey everyone, my name is Yami. I am your Latina next door. Welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time watching and you enjoy high-end home decor and DIYs on a budget, as well as extreme before and after renovations, please make sure to hit like and subscribe so that you too can become part of the familia. So for today's video, I am going to be taking some items that I have in my home that I might sometimes think about discarding, getting rid of, or getting out of the house and try to revamp them, repurpose them, or reuse them in a different way. As a DIYer, I create a lot of different things, and sometimes I have things that are left over from previous projects. So I'm going to try and see what I have in my stash, and I'm going to hopefully create some useful, beautiful things for my home. But before I start, I'm going to go ahead and give thank you to my sponsor, Cricut, for partnering with me on this video. And with that being said, let's get started. Now, you might be like me and you love a beautiful smelling home. And both myself and the Latino engineer love to have nice smelling candles in the house. But then we end up with all these empty containers in the house because I can't put myself to throw them away. But then I started learning that these candles that are mass produced in large quantities and sold at really cheap prices aren't really good for us to burn in our homes. And when I started looking at alternative solutions like Soy Candles, the prices were outrageous. So I did a little bit of digging and I found a place where I can buy my own soy and my own candle products and create them for really inexpensive, and I get to use these containers over again. So most of the time when you have these containers, they usually have a little bit of wax on the bottom and all these stickers that you have to remove. And of course, we want a nice clean canvas. We don't want it to look like we reuse something that was previously something else. So the first thing I want to do is remove the labels. Then you stick the candle in the freezer for at least an hour. This causes the remaining wax left in the container to shrink, and it's easier to remove. And then just give it a good wash, and if you have any residue from any of the stickers remaining, make sure you use some Goo Gone and it comes right off. Alright, so once you have your containers nice and clean, you're going to need a scale, and I actually have one in my kitchen for food preparation purposes. And you're going to want to put it into ounces and then measure out the soy wax content that you will need. Now I'll go ahead and leave a link to the online store where I purchased all of these supplies. It actually came in a really nice kit to get you started and with very clear and easy to follow instructions, which I really appreciated. Next, you're going to pour your wax into a stove or hot burner safe container and try not to make a mess like me. I kept the container on low, and then I constantly stirred the wax, making sure that it melted evenly and nothing burned at the bottom. This was honestly so much fun. It was something new for me. I hadn't done it before. I've been wanting to. Even my husband was curious at how this was done, and I had a good time doing this, honestly. Now, you have to do things at a certain point, and the wax has to get hot at a particular temperature in order to add the fragrance. Now, the fragrance I am adding is amazing. It's called Egyptian Amber, and oh my goodness, everybody loves this. The house was smelling divine that day. I don't know if you're like me, but personally, I'm very picky when it comes to candle scents. I'm either too sensitive, don't like them, or they're just too strong. And I was enjoying this process, and this fragrance is just, it's something else. It feels like you're in a spa. So according to the instructions, you're supposed to stir the fragrance in and then let it cool to a certain temperature before you pour it into your container. So while the wax was cooling, that's what I was doing. I was preparing my little wicks, and it was rather easy. The kit comes with everything that you need. And I had these little tabs that went perfectly underneath the wick stems, and then they adhered right on to the bottom as you see there. And they're also heat resistant, so they won't like melt off when the hot wax gets poured in. And all you do is stick it in the center of your container like this, and then add your little metal wick stabilizer thingy so that the wick stays in place. Then once your candle wax gets to about 135 degrees or so, you stir it around and then you begin to pour them in. Once inside the containers and it starts cooling, you will notice that the wax will start getting cloudy again. Now, I only did 2 candles this time because obviously it was my first time and I didn't know if I was going to screw it up. And so I wanted to keep things minimal until I got the hang of it. And even though I only made 2, I was so excited because if I can control what I burn inside my home as well as control the fragrances, oh, I'm going to be so happy this Christmas season when I have all sorts of smells around the house. And one of the things that I've always thought would be so much fun would be to sell candles. Maybe that's something in my future, but for right now, I am definitely enjoying these. Now, in order to take my candles to the next level, I want to create a little label because why not? I want to make them look really beautiful inside my home so they don't look like they were previously, again, trash that I just happened to use for this. So I uploaded this image from the internet. You can go anywhere on the internet, and as long as you use an image for yourself, you can grab it and upload it to Cricut Design Space and make it a cuttable image for yourself. And that's exactly what I do. I love doing that. There's always a lot of images online that you can select from. So I just pull this image into a new file and I orient it in the right direction. And of course I have to put a label. So I take some text and write what I want to put on there. After I type the text, I look for a font that I like, and honestly, this is probably the part that takes me the longest, is trying to figure out what font I want to use. Then once I select the font, I like to make sure it looks well inside of the label. I change the color of it to white and make sure it's set at basic cut. And then for this one, I went ahead and selected it, sliced it, removed what I had sliced out, and then I sent it to cut. I cut the pieces individually. And then I weeded them. Now I could have done the letters kind of clear with the black label, but then I decided to take away the label portion and then leave the words as well as a nice border. That way it didn't look so heavy on my candle container. Before I add the label, I will be cutting down my wick. And now I'll use transfer tape to add my label onto the glass. My second label for this smaller candle was a little bit smaller. And I love that this candle had a little lid, which made it look even cuter. Now I will say the small little candle had a tiny little imperfection next to the wick. Again, it was my first time, but all in all, I think this experience was quite nice and I think this DIY was a success. For my next treasure, you recall that I had previously made this cute little cover for my toaster oven in my kitchen. It's been a little while and I decided that it was looking a little sad and I wanted to change it out, especially with a new season looming ahead. So I had this piece of fabric and this ruffle lying around. Does anybody recognize this ruffle? This actually came from one of my favorite DIYs ever, and that was this beautiful farmhouse style tablecloth that I had done in my previous home. And I love this tablecloth, but I made a rookie mistake when making it. I did not wash the fabric before I created this tablecloth, and when I went in to wash it, even though I did it in cold wash and I hung dry it, it shrunk. And as you see, it's a very fitting tablecloth, and it did not fit this table anymore. I was heartbroken because I really loved that tablecloth, and I know a lot of you guys did too. If you haven't seen that tutorial, I will leave it in the description box below. Just don't make the same mistake that I did. And I had this fabric left over, and I was like, what am I going to do with it? So I took it apart and decided that I was going to use the fabric from it to create something else. So here I am. So since I already have my tutorial on how to do an appliance cover, I'm going to kind of go through this part a little bit more swiftly than usual because I do have that tutorial already. But basically, you want to take whatever fabric you have and you want it to cover the entire thing all the way to the bottom as much as possible. Now mine didn't go all the way to the bottom just because I was using a scrap piece of fabric, but you want to have like an entire ear on the left, as you see here. It'll look like a Yoda ear is what I like to call them. And you're going to want to drape it over, make sure it hangs really nicely, and you're going to want to take pins and place them on the edge of the toaster oven. Now, if you have a piece of fabric like this where it's longer on one side, I just add a little pin, remove it, cut that off, and then put it back on the toaster oven and continue to pin my little ears on each of the four corners. Once all of the corners are pinned, remove it and then take it to your sewing machine and sew them down. Now, I know that the pins are placed in a very inconvenient way because they're kind of facing your sewing foot, and you need to remove it before you run the foot along, but that's just kind of how it has to be placed when the fabric is hanging. At least for me, it's easier that way. Then after all four ears are sewn, you want to cut them off. I like to run those seams on my serger for added protection and strength. Next, you're going to take your appliance cover and turn it right side out, and then you're going to take your ruffle, face it right side down, but upside down on the appliance cover as you see me doing right here, and then I'm just going to pin it all the way around the border. Next, I'm going to sew the ruffle onto the appliance cover. Now, because of how the sides kind of drape and how they are folded down, sometimes you're going to have a lot of fabric left over on one side when you don't have as much left on another side. And that's okay. I'm going to remove that excess fabric with my serger in a little bit. So then after I remove the excess fabric with my serger, I bring it back to my sewing machine, and what I like to do is I like to sew the border where I attach the ruffle onto the fabric so that it doesn't bubble and it has a nice little seam right there. So I thought it would be really nice to add a word saying Reposteria, which means pastry shop or bakery in Spanish, and I created this image on Canva, and it's a great place to go because it's free. You can create little signs like this and then just upload it again on my design space so that I can use it and put it on my cute little cover that's gonna go for my toaster oven. Now, after I remove everything that I don't want on the image to be cut, I size it down to the necessary size. Now, I did start this off by having this border, but then I ended up removing it in the final result. And because I had created it outside, uploaded it, and I made sure there was nothing there that I didn't want. It was ready to cut as soon as I sized it down. And for this application, I decided to use the Cricut stencil material. I removed the word, and then with my transfer tape, removed it from the backing. And as you see here, I only have the word and not the border. And I just simply took some black chalk paint and began to color in the stencil. I did end up changing my brush though, because it is better to do this with a stiff stenciling brush, and this was not the right one. And then once my chalk paint was dry, I put my little heat pad on underneath it and then added some parchment paper on top, and then used my Cricut press in order to set my paint on the fabric. And that was it for this DIY, and I think this cover looks absolutely darling. And my shrunken tablecloth did not go to waste. Now for this next DIY, it's pretty much the same concept. However, I am applying it to something totally different because I still had some of that fabric left over, as well as some of that ruffle. I don't know about you, but a lot of times I see covers for the square upright tissue boxes, but not for the rectangular ones. I don't know why they're not that popular. So I decided to go ahead and make a little cover for this as well. Again, following the same concept as the appliance cover. This time though, I needed to create a hole because I needed to be able to pull my tissue out. So the best idea that I got was to create a buttonhole, and I honestly have never done this before. This was my first time, so I guess I just drew a line on the center of the box, and then I went to my sewing machine and I did the button stitch. I just used the pencil line as my guide. Once the stitching was done, I cut out the hole. And I'm sorry, I know my camera angle is not the best here, but I was really looking closely to make sure that I didn't cut the stitching and only cut the fabric. I tried to get the opening to look as nice and clean as possible, but if you have any tips or suggestions on how to do this better, send them my way. And I didn't add anything else to this. I just kept it nice and plain because I thought it would just look darling. And again, it's another way or idea to use some of that scrap fabric that you have in your stash. Now this next DIY is going to relate to our best intentions. Because sometimes we have the best intentions and we buy things thinking we're going to use it for a project, and sometimes we just don't get to them, or we just don't get to them. So this little heart, I had originally got it for a Valentine's DIY that never came into fruition. And sometimes these little wood forms look a little country, like the old school country from back in the day, so they don't look always that appealing to do DIYs with unless it's something specific like for Valentine's Day. So I decided that I was going to pull this out and make something of it so that it didn't go unused. And I decided to go ahead and paint it the same color that I painted my most amazing candlesticks ever. The color is Sandstorm, and it's a beautiful green sagey color, but it's very light. And that's what I decided to use for this DIY. This paint has amazing coverage. I only needed one coat, and it is by Folk Art Home Decor chalk paint line. Now I had this grapevine wreath form lying around, as well as some bushes that I have left over again from previous projects. This little lavender pack is from Walmart and it's only 97 cents. And I had these, as you can see, I've used some of them already. And there's just these two little lonely picks that I had for a previous project, and I'm no longer using it for that project, so I decided let's just go ahead and use this and try to create a pretty wreath out of this. Now, of course, the first thing you want to do is cut your floral bushes into individual floral stems, and I use a wire cutter for this. And next, you're just going to start sticking them into the grapevine wreath. You can always use hot glue for this in order to secure them, but they were actually staying pretty well. The grapevine was actually nice and tight, and so I didn't have to worry about using any hot glue for this, which is also really nice because if I want to change it up in the future with some other leftover florals, I can totally do it. So as you can see, I started with the greenery on the outside, I added the lavender second, and then finally I add the white florals in the center. Next, I decided to cut the letter P so that I can place it onto my little heart, just like a little monogram to go on the wreath. Now, this is also another way you can use up all of those weird little leftover pieces of vinyl paper that you may have lying around. Next, we're going to turn around that little heart and we're going to add some string to the back of it. And what I like to do is I like to place hot glue to secure the string onto the back of it, but then I like to place a little small piece of popsicle stick on top of it, and that will hold the string down even better. Next, I took the little heart and with my string, I fastened it onto the wreath form. Alright, for my last DIY, we're going to go back to the idea of using some of these leftover candle containers. Now, you know I always like to share different ideas when it comes to using your Cricut for your items at home. And in this case, I am going to upload an image that I found online, another cute little image. It's the shape of a rounded off heart. And I simply uploaded it to my design space, and then what I did was I turned it into a cut file. Then I uploaded it to a new file. So I'm going to shrink it down to the size that I want, and I am going to turn it to the right 90 degrees. And then I am going to duplicate it, and I'm going to create rows using this little image. When doing something like this, you may want to zoom in and make sure that everything is lined up nice and perfectly and everything is spaced out evenly, and the grid lines really do help you with this. The first row is the trickiest, but after you get the first row, then you can duplicate the entire row after you group it, and then you can place it underneath it. Now you can place it directly underneath it, or you can stagger it like I do. For this, you're going to want to measure the height of the container that you're going to be applying this on, as well as the entire diameter. That way you know how long to make this. Basically the same steps and measurements that we took when I created these candle hurricanes in a previous video. But we're taking it a step further and doing something different. Now after you get all of your rows, you're going to want to add a rectangle above it. Change the color and send it to the back of the image so that you can see the hearts better and see where they lay. You're going to want to bring the rectangle in a little bit, creating a frame around the little heart shapes. Then you're going to select everything and hit attach. The next step is take it to your Cricut maker, and for something like this, I'm going to be needing a longer mat because this is over 12 inches. I then select the stencil vinyl, but I'm going to do less pressure because whenever I'm doing something like this, and I might have some trial and error because I need to make sure that it fits correctly around a candle holder or hurricane, I like to use inexpensive contact paper from the dollar store so that if I do mess up and need to retry it several times, I am not using up my really nice Cricut vinyl and just using this as practice. So that's what I'm using here. Once it's cut, I am going to remove all of those little rounded heart shapes from my vinyl. Next, I'm going to add my transfer tape. And then I'm going to carefully roll my container over the vinyl, making sure that everything stays nice and straight. And then you want to make sure to remove your transfer tape. And the reason that I staggered them and it worked out perfectly was because they would eventually come back and meet each other. And in this case, it totally worked out. I made sure to apply pressure on everything to ensure that it was on there securely. And then I took some etching cream and then applied it all over the little shapes all the way around. Now I have used etching before on glass and it's really simple. You basically apply it onto the glass, let it sit there for the specified time, and then remove with water. Now I don't know what was wrong with this etching cream. It was brand new, so I don't know if it was a bad batch or if my glass was treated differently, but it didn't quite take the first time, and then I tried it again and it took a little bit better, but it didn't do as good a job as it has done in the past. But either way, that is all there is to etching glass. And I hope this gave you another idea as far as what you can use the Cricut for and how you can apply this technique with things you already have in your home. Well, that is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please make sure to give this video a like and let me know in the comments below which one of these DIYs was your favorite. Before you leave, don't forget to subscribe and make sure you check that notification bell so that you don't miss a future video. I will see you guys next week with another home decor and DIY video. Until then, adios.